1 in 6 people have NPD or are a narcissist. So if you think about your family, your friend group, your coworker group, and you think about how many people are in that group, there's likely somebody, in there that you know. I'll tell you my own experience, and we see this repeatedly. So you start to question your reality. You start to question yourself. You get into people pleasing. It is people pleasing on steroids. You are trying to do everything to keep the peace, to keep harmony, to make sure everybody else is happy. My body was screaming at me that something was wrong. I had abnormal precancerous skin lesions removed from my body. My hair all broke off and fell out. And at the peak of it, in my 30s, I got shingles on my face. My whole face is swollen, my eyes swelling shut. And when I went in, she was like, I am so happy you got in because you could have actually gone blind from this. I think trusting yourself, and that takes time, right? So when I go back and I think about every time I felt there was a red flag or I had that gut instinct or feeling, it was never wrong. And I think once something like this happens in your own life, then and you look back and you go, oh man, my intuition was right the entire time, and you question it or you ignore it, you never question it again. So pay attention to your intuition, right? And so the whole idea of the gray rock method is to basically become as uninteresting as possible. Because what fuels a narcissist is your reaction. The stronger a reaction you get, the more upset you get, the more they like it, the more they thrive on that. And I know that sounds so sick and twisted, and it really is.
Hello, it's your leadership coach, Estelle Reed, and host of Optimizing Leader Brilliance, the place for calm, confident, and strategic leadership. Stay tuned to the end for a mini coaching and reflective practice. Find out more about my services by heading over to estellereed.com. Today, we're tackling a topic that is often the silent killer of healthy company culture, and that's narcissism. Joining us is Ginny Preem, a master certified life coach, keynote speaker, and the #1 best-selling author of You're My Favourite, and her latest hit, Unsubscribe. This new book is for leaders, professionals, and people pleasers who have mastered doing more, giving more, and holding it all together, yet still feel quietly depleted by the emotional labour of it all. Ginny's expertise was forged through personal betrayal that forced her to rebuild her life from the ground up. Today, she helps leaders develop their NarcDAR to spot toxic patterns and establish the boundaries necessary to protect their peace. So, welcome everyone. I've got Ginny here with me, who is an expert in narcissism. A great topic for the audience because it often comes into coaching sessions, either through someone having a narcissistic boss or even family member. So it's great to have you here, Ginny. Thank you so much for coming on. So tell me, what is a narcissist?
That's a loaded question. And I love how you already teed it up to say they can be anywhere, right? Like, I think oftentimes narcissists are, or narcissistic relationships are thought to be romantic relationships, but you can have them in your family, in your friend groups, at work, your coworker, even worse, your boss. So what a narcissist is, and I think it's really misunderstood, and it's a word that gets thrown around very flippantly these days, right? Everyone's going, oh, they're toxic, they're a narcissist. Some of these things getting overused. So when it comes down to it, and someone to have narcissistic personality disorder, to have the diagnosis, they need to have persistently 5 of 9 criteria present that are presented in the DSM-5. It also needs to impact their daily life. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember all 9 off the top of my head, but some of those include the sense of grandiosity, right? They will exaggerate their achievements, lie about their accomplishments, whether it's a promotion, a job title, their education. their salary, whatever it might be, their net worth. And then there is the undervaluing of others and overvaluing of themselves. They have a real lack of empathy. So, this lack of empathy for others, the lack of ability to genuinely care for others, because again, they put themselves first. They have to feed their own egos. Everything is about feeding themselves, making themselves feel better. And one of the misconceptions is that people think that they really love themselves, but it's actually the opposite. They're trying to fill this void within themselves because they don't like themselves very much either. But it comes off as this arrogance, egotistical kind of persona. So the list goes on and on, but they need to have, those are some of the core ones that we see most present and persistent. That lack of empathy, overvaluing others or undervaluing others to overvalue themselves, the exaggeration, the pathological lying. There's just, it's so nuanced and it is a scale. So when we say someone is a narcissist or narcissistic, we all have some narcissistic tendencies. And that's why it's really important to make that distinction and differentiation between narcissism, narcissistic, narcissist versus actually having narcissistic personality disorder. But if you look at probably the world's biggest guru, Dr. Ramani, she says and talks about the prevalence of narcissism today. And I think it's just because there's more awareness. I think social media can feed into it. But she estimates that 1 in 6 people have NPD or are a narcissist. So if you think about your family, your friend group, your coworker group, and you think about how many people are in that group, there's likely somebody, in there that you know.
And can I clarify? So NDPR, what does that stand for?
Narcissistic personality disorder, so NPD.
NPD. Yeah, that's me being slightly dyslexic, not hearing.
And me talking very fast.
So my experience also is that there are two sides to the coin as well. So on the one hand, it can be presented as this grandiose type character. And so an example where I've experienced that in leadership coaching scenario is where I'd got the deputy CEO and the CEO both on a Zoom call. And straight away, the CEO put the deputy CEO down. It was like, what, why are you wearing that? You need to be smarter for these calls. And it was almost like he was elevating himself to make his deputy feel less than. And then the other thing I've experienced is this vulnerable narcissist where they present differently. So I think you referred to it earlier as, is it covert?
Yeah, so there's covert and overt.
Great. So tell us more about covert. How do we spot that?
Yeah, so covert, one of the things with narcissists, and this can run on both sides, this can be a more overt or covert tendency where they will play the victim or the hero. So they always either have to be the hero or they're the victim. And that's where you sometimes will see that more covert tendency, kind of playing the victim card, woe is me, everything always happens to me. And the overt is more of that putting other people down, needing to look like the hero. They don't tend to play the victim as much, but if they don't get their way, right, they'll have adult temper tantrums, is what we literally call them. And they might even rage out at somebody. I've definitely seen like narcissistic rage is not something that you want to see. And it's because they're almost having a temper tantrum because they're not getting their way. You think about a toddler, and that's how they get emotionally stunted in that age, like a toddler. And that's why we call them adult temper tantrums or narcissistic temper tantrums. But yeah, it's interesting that you've seen that in play out in real life where they will put other people down to make themselves feel better about themselves. And it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And how did you get interested in this as a topic? What's your origin story? What are the connections? How do you end up being an expert in narcissism?
So I was when I was in corporate, I was living my best life. So I had my big corporate job. I was traveling all the time for work and traveling for fun, hanging out with my friends, hanging out with my dogs that I just love. And then I was introduced to this guy. I call him Chad. And I was not interested in dating him. He was courting me pretty hard, but for two reasons. One, because I just said how good my life was and why would I want to mess with a good thing, but also because he had two kids. And I just didn't want to get involved in that sort of a dynamic. But he eventually broke my walls down. I opened the door, and fast forward, I fall in love. And I meet his two kids, and I fall in love two more times. So all of a sudden, I find myself with this instant family. I am finding myself in places where I never dreamed. Eventually, they moved in here into my home part time. When they weren't with us, they were with their mom, who's amazing. And I found myself in places like school pickup lines and drop off lines, packing lunches in the morning, going to sporting events on the weekend. And instead of eating on the beach in Greece, I'm having popcorn on Friday night, having movie night with these kids that I just absolutely love. And even though it was not something I ever expected, I was really happy. And I was surprised at how happy I was. So life is good. Until one day, I was coming home from a work trip and a friend texted me to urgently meet for cocktails at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday night. And I slide in the booth, and she proceeds to display this arrangement of evidence about Chad, the man that was at home in my house. He turned out to be a complete fraud in every way. I was not only in a psychologically, emotionally, financially, mentally abusive relationship, and he is quite the epitome and example of a narcissist. So when that relationship ended, it really sent me on this healing, growing, learning journey. And so what I learned is his behaviors were familiar to me. And sometimes there's comfort in familiarity, even if it's not healthy. And so what I learned is that my family of origin, I came from a narcissistic household. And so this is why I started to, my best friend, the people that I was choosing to be closest in my life were actually quite abusive to me. So I really had to learn not only the behaviors that were around me, but my own behaviors, the type of people they like to target, the behaviors that you develop as coping mechanisms when you are around these types of behaviors.
How would you recognize the behaviors of a narcissist? So, what did you see? What did you hear, either in Chad or your friends or in family relationships? What were the red flags that you
Yeah.
spotted?
So the red flags are things like when you start to feel like you're going crazy, like you're not remembering things the way that they actually happened, when you're being told that something that happened that you experienced didn't happen at all, that you misremembered. That's what we hear often as the term gaslighting. So it is when and that actually stems from a movie from the 1950s, is where the term came from, where this man was turning down the lights in the house. And the wife was like, wait, the lights, I swear the lights were on or the lights were up. And he was like, no, you're misremembering. So that's where the term actually comes from. So since we're on this kind of learning journey together about narcissism, there's a term that takes it one step further. Part of gaslighting is a term called DARVO. It's an acronym, and it's DARVO, and it stands for deny, attack, and then reverse the victim and offender. So when you address a narcissist, which is generally not a bad idea, or generally not a great idea, because they will implement these types of techniques, and it's almost like they all have the same textbook. It's so crazy. So at one point, when I knew in my bones and my soul that Chad was cheating on me, which was just one of the many facets of the type of grandiosity. And I'll give you like an example of the grandiosity of his behavior, right? So all of these different components, all of the things that I listed earlier about things that he has lied about, Those are all things he's lied about: his education, his net worth, his salary, his job, everything. But DARVO, so when I came home one day and I was addressing with him, where were you? The security system wasn't working. He was like, I can't, it's not my fault if the technology's not working. And I'm like, but it's working now. And it was working on Thursday night, but then it wasn't working until Saturday morning. So I'm like, so it just was glitching during that time frame. He wasn't home. And mind you, at that time I had elderly dogs. So he was abusing and neglecting and leaving my elderly dogs, which I think is just one of the most horrific offenses, to neglect an animal like that. I had counted his Viagra pills. There's two missing. And he was like, I don't know where they went, but I didn't take them. It was just like repeat, repeat, repeat. Then he had a narcissistic rage, blew up at me saying, fine, if you really want to know where they went, my friend took them. Okay. So then, in the midst of the conversation, all of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, had I known there were any trust issues in this relationship, I would have never uprooted my children and moved them into your home.
Can you do a little thing to help me out? And that's to simply hit subscribe or the follow button now, wherever it is that you're listening. So that's maybe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, because that will help the podcast get found by other people. And that then enables us to keep going because we continue to keep growing. What would be 5-star amazing though is if you could also leave a review. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
Claiming that I made them, portraying that I made them have this unstable situation. When, mind you, after he moved out of my house, that was the sixth place that he lived in 5 years. The most stability those children ever had was when they were with me on his side, outside of their mom's side. So that's an example of kind of reversing that victim and offender when they feel pinned against the wall.
Wow, that's scary, isn't it?
There's only two times where I felt really pretty scared. It was almost like his eyes turned to stone. I didn't even recognize who I was talking to. It was wild.
Yeah. And what's been your experience of narcissism in the workplace? Have you had any other similar experiences that you can recall?
Unfortunately, yes. And sometimes I'm like, did I unconsciously make that decision to work for this person because I really am that comfortable with these types of toxic behaviors? So, yeah, I had a boss. Oh, just the worst. And I recently, a good friend of mine is interviewing for a position where she might report to him, and that is her, like, very much a major deciding factor. I requested a 360 review because I'm one of those people that I feel like you should always be learning and growing and see where you can improve and do better, and then lean into the areas that you are really great at. And he called me and he goes, oh, yeah, I did you a solid. I just completed your 360 review. Dingaling didn't realize that when it is your direct supervisor, their answers are not anonymous. So he feigned that he was going to come in and be the hero and really prop me up and say all these great things about me. And literally, he gave me the worst reviews, and I was his best performer on his team. The problem is he was threatened by my talent. He couldn't do my job, and he knew I could do his job better than him. So the only way to make himself feel secure and safe was to try to devalue me and take me down. Mind you, he had also tried to give me his hotel room key twice and told me to meet him in his hotel room. Is he married with a family? Yes, he is. And the second time it happened, you know what he said to me, Estelle? He said, this is the second time you've done this to me.
What are the consequences of being on the receiving end of a narcissist?
I'll tell you my own experience, and we see this repeatedly. So you start to question your reality. You start to question yourself. You get into, like, we hear the word people pleasing. It is people pleasing on steroids. You are trying to do everything to keep the peace, to keep harmony, to make sure everybody else is happy, even if it means at the expense of completely losing yourself, which is what happened to me. And not only that, it was such a horrible situation where my body was screaming at me that something was wrong. I had abnormal precancerous skin lesions removed from my body. My hair all broke off and fell out. And at the peak of it, in my 30s, I got shingles on my face.
Gosh.
And I think sometimes people think, oh, shingles, it's a skin condition. Yes, it appears on your skin, but it actually is attacking your nervous system. And where I had it by my eye, it starts to follow the nervous path. And luckily, I had connections because I worked in dermatology and aesthetics for almost 2 decades. And so I had a dear friend that was willing to get me in pretty quickly. When I messaged her on a Monday, I was like, this has been going on for 4 or 5 days. I feel like if it was like a spider bite or something, it would be getting better, but it seems to be getting worse. My whole face is swollen, my eyes swelling shut. And when I went in, she was like, I am so happy you got in because you could have actually gone blind from this.
Isn't the body an amazing thing in terms of how it communicates? There's this dotted connection with imposter syndrome as well that creates when you feel like you're going crazy and it causes massive self-doubt and all that kind of thing. And I think that's probably why narcissism comes up for my clients as well. But interestingly, I had skin cancer, my hair fell out. So we have to listen to our bodies, don't we? Because it's amazing how they communicate that something's out of whack for us. And so, what's the solution? How do we deal with a narcissist? What things can we put in place to overcome?
Yeah. I think trusting yourself, and that takes time, right? So when I go back and I think about every time I felt there was a red flag or I had that gut instinct or feeling, it was never wrong. And I think once something like this happens in your own life, then and you look back and you go, oh man, my intuition was right the entire time, and you question it or you ignore it, you never question it again. So pay attention to your intuition, right? That's one thing that you can do for yourself. If something feels off, it probably is. But if you're looking to really manage a relationship with a narcissist, but you can implement some version or variation of the gray rock method. And so the whole idea of the gray rock method is to basically become as uninteresting as possible. Because what fuels a narcissist is your reaction. The stronger a reaction you get, the more upset you get, the more they like it, the more they thrive on that. And I know that sounds so sick and twisted, and it really is. I'll give you some examples of how I implemented the gray rock method with a friendship and with a toxic employee. So in the friendship, this friend would do things like when I was just getting ready to leave corporate, she would try to instill fear in me. Oh, aren't you just scared? Aren't you scared about gas prices and grocery prices? And how are you going to get health care? And you must just be so terrified. No, thanks for your concern. I'm not. No reaction, just really not entertaining the conversation. You stop sharing information with them. They will tell you that they hate gossip, that they don't like drama. Oh, they feed off of it. And so what you'll notice is they constantly will ask you questions, try to get information out of you, and it's not because they're genuinely interested or care. It's that they can use it against you later. So I had coffee with this particular friend the day before I was going on a trip to Paris. I didn't tell her. When she saw that I was in Paris on social media, she called another friend and flipped out. So then, passive aggressively, what she started doing was calling me when it was the middle of the night there. I had my phone on silent or do not disturb or off or whatever, so I didn't hear anything. So that was fine. But then, what really broke the relationship was when I started my podcast and I didn't tell her. So all of a sudden she sees I have this podcast. The first, whatever, 2, 4 episodes are launched. I'm promoting it. She didn't have any part of it. She didn't know anything about it. And that really wounded her enough to cut me out of her life, which is what I wanted. But when you make it their decision, then they still feel like they have all the power. So you just start to back away. And really, it's called the gray rock method because you are trying to just become as uninteresting as possible, like a gray rock. It is hard. You have to be consistent and persistent. And the closer the relationship is, the more difficult it is.
What's the name of your podcast, by the way? Quick shout out.
Oh, you're so sweet. Unsubscribe with Ginny Preem.
Great. Which leads us into your best-selling book, doesn't it? Tell us about Unsubscribe.
Yeah, so my number one bestseller is You're My Favorite, which is all the juicy details of my story with Chad. And then if
Yes.
you're on a healing and growing journey, there's a follow-up called I'm My Favorite, which is a guided journal and walks you through some of the steps that I took to, return to myself and go on that path forward. And then the latest book that just came out is Unsubscribe, Why Letting Go is the Secret to Getting Ahead. And it's really resonating because it's a filter to help people reclaim time, energy, and boundaries at work and in life. And it's based around 4 pillars. So I know sometimes when people are like, ooh, unsubscribe. Yeah, let that go, ignore, walk away from things. But it's really not about flippantly walking away from things or burning everything down and having to start over. It's about actionability, action steps, accountability, and really owning things, right? Determining where your time and energy is best spent so you can focus on what truly matters. And I developed it because this is what I wish I had long ago when I was dealing with these types of people. And it helps you put everything, whether it's a work thing, a life thing, a relationship, a challenge that you're dealing with, fits into one of the 4 pillars and helps you take better steps, make better, faster decisions. So you are focusing on what is the most meaningful for you.
That's great. And to close the loop on, we covered the friendship aspect of that example. Can we move on to the leadership example or the work example and connect the dots between unsubscribe as well?
So when it comes to relationships with coworkers or your boss in leadership, I would say so the 4 pillars of unsubscribe are block, mute, swap, and manage. So can you block your boss? No, probably not, right? It's probably not very realistic. Where if you're dealing with a toxic coworker or leader, it would go in the manage, right? That's something that you can't walk away from, that you do need to figure out a way to incorporate them into your lives, but it's never about controlling them. Unsubscribe is really about your own behavior. So when I say manage, if you're looking at a relationship, there's a few different ways that we can manage that relationship and the interactions, the communications, and the time that you spend with them. You can manage the type of interaction. If seeing them in person is not ideal, maybe it's a phone call or a Zoom. If that's not realistic, text or email. And if you are dealing, so this actually applies to coworkers, friendship, co-parenting. If you're co-parenting with a narcissist or a toxic person, moving all of your communication to writing suits you very well. Things can't get twisted and turned. It can't be, you said this, everything is documented. So that kind of gives you protection. I have done that. I had a very toxic coworker and I moved all of my communication either to writing, or if it had to be a call like this, I would never do it one-on-one with her. I would always make sure there was a third party present. Okay. So those are ways that you can manage the type of interaction and communication you're having with them.
That's great
You know,
advice. But it's such a shame that we have to even think about doing it, isn't it? Because you get into that covering your back and copying everybody into emails. But it's necessary,
unfortunately,
isn't
it's
it?
the reality that we live in today. And if you want to manage protect your own sanity, sometimes it's necessary. You can
Mm.
also look at the amount of time you're spending with these people and the frequency. So if you see somebody once a month, is that too much? Maybe you go on once every other month. And I have this concept, I love to call it, we all understand the concept of our bank account, right? Money coming in. Money is a currency that we all understand. But don't you think your time and your energy is just as valuable, if not more so, of a currency? And you think about those people that just suck the energy, drain the energy out of a room or immediately from you. Those types of people, we have to manage how that looks. So paying attention to and treating our energy and our time as a valuable currency, just like we do our money, and paying attention to those interactions in those relationships, and maybe removing those energy drains, those energy vampires from our lives, or at least manage the relationship where it does get to a place that's tolerable for you, that you are okay with.
So when I trained as a coach, they covered relationships and they said, look, becoming a coach will change the dynamic potentially with friendships, with family members, etc., etc. And we even had a conversation about maybe some relationships will end. So, do you have any words of wisdom? I know I'm a really loyal person, and I think empaths often attract narcissistic people, don't they? And which the way it affects me is that because I'm an empath and because I'm a really loyal person, it takes me a while to catch up in terms of what's okay and what's not okay. And yeah, so I can remember our lead coach saying, look, it might be worth going through your list of people and going, who is it that you're going to sever ties with? But we didn't actually get to any practical strategies to be able to do that. So, in terms of block, mute, swap, manage, do you have any practical strategies or experience of severing those ties with people?
And first of all, Estelle, I want to thank you for saying that and sharing your own perspective and having the self-awareness, right? It is hard. And I think especially as women and high achievers, removing somebody from your life that treats you like garbage, it doesn't mean that you have a lack of loyalty, right? That's being loyal to yourself. So sometimes it's just changing the way that we look at it. And again, we do audits with our money, we do audits with our finances. Why shouldn't we do audits with the relationships? Again, valuing our time and currency in our lives. And we shouldn't feel guilty about doing what's best for us. And sometimes friendships evolve. I don't know anyone that has all of the same friends that they did from childhood or from elementary school or junior high. Honestly, that would be weird. That would mean that none of you have evolved from being 7 years old. So our friendships get to evolve. You get to evolve. And I think it's not that we need to wear it like a badge of honor, but I think we should be proud of that evolution and recognizing and realizing that something's not working for you anymore. You wouldn't you wouldn't live in a house that doesn't work for you anymore, right? You move. You wouldn't drive a car. So I think it's the same concept, but yes, there's a human component, which I think makes it that much more important to assess because you're talking about your emotions, your well-being, how you're spending your time and your energy. So I say once a year, once a quarter, whatever that works for you, do an audit. Sit down and look at your energy bank account, your time bank account, and see where it's going, see how it's spent. And what I can tell you from experience and from coaching, when you start to block or mute or manage those toxic relationships, what starts to happen is your healthy relationships start to flourish. You create space for that. And then when you do that, now you have all these flourishing, healthy, loving, wonderful relationships. It starts to welcome more of that in.
Interestingly, I've just downloaded an app, a new app. So I've used Weltery for years, which monitors stress and all that kind of thing and keeps me in check because I suffer with intense focus sometimes. But this latest app is tracking HRV, and I've been able to look over the years and spot where it's red, what days it's red, who I was with, and what I was doing and how I was draining my own energy. And it has been such a great loop back, raising awareness of what's working and who is draining your energy. I'm just looking to see which app. Yeah, it's called Stress Watch for those of you listening. There's plenty of other apps out there as well. But have it, for me, I like tangible evidence. And then it reinforces, doesn't it, that you referred to it as your intuition or your gut instinct.
Paying attention to those signs. Like when your body, if you start to panic and get anxiety when you see that person's name on your phone calling, that's a sign. If every time you see that person, you get a migraine leading up to it or a stomach ache, right? These are all signs your body telling you. So I love that you actually have the evidence and this app, because I also make evidence-based decisions, not necessarily emotional. So having it tied back to evidence, it is real. These things are real, and having something that you can pay attention to is great. So thank you for sharing that.
We have a tradition on this podcast where the previous guest leaves a question for a future guest. And Sam, he's a social media influencer. He's got over 1 million followers, an amazing guy who he raises awareness of people with stammers. And he left a question for you, and his question is so when you were younger, what did you want to become?
First of all, this ties perfectly into your brand. It's brilliant. So you're optimizing your brilliance with doing this, something really unique, having the next person leave a question. What did I want to be? I don't know if I had anything really specific that I wanted to be when I was little. I will tell you, I've always loved fashion. When I went into college, I wanted to go into fashion merchandising. And so that those were all the schools that I looked at. I had gotten scholarships to a few different schools, and that was how I made the decision based on having that sort of a degree. And then I was like, unless I become like the next Calvin Klein or Donna Karan, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford the things that I want to buy in fashion. So I ended up changing my degree multiple times. I actually studied psychology for a while, so I technically could have a minor in psychology if I had taken that one lab credit. I ended up, my degree is in professional sales. It was one of only 5 schools that had that degree at the time, which really is psychology, right? Like understanding people's behaviors and why they do what they do. So maybe somehow it has still served me in some way.
And connect the dots back. Where do you think that interest in psychology comes from? When
My messed
girl.
up family of origin? I don't know.
We become great observers, I think, of humans as children. And that's where my interest comes from in
Yes.
psychology. Yeah. So, what question would you like to leave for my next guest?
My question for your next guest would be, what is it that you've been hanging on to that's not serving you any longer, that you are ready to let go of and unsubscribe from?
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Giving me chills. Another connection. So I have something called the clear model. The L in the clear model is let go.
It's so
It's
important.
no wonder it became a hit in the movie Frozen.
It's our theme song, Estelle.
I'm known for singing it occasionally when I'm struggling to let something go. So, to bring things to a close, if there were 3 actionable steps or 3 things that you would recommend in relation to narcissism, what would they be?
So I always like to bring in a dadism or two. So my dad was my guy, and he passed away 5 years ago. And he had these
Oh.
things, I've coined them dadisms. And I always say not to be confused with a dad joke because they're not funny. Both dad jokes and dadisms are poorly timed and well intended. But so 2 of them really do tie into this. So one is you're only as good as the company you keep. And I always, that my dad loved to lay that one on me around like junior high school, right? Like when you're trying to figure out who you are, you're in these new schools, trying to make friends, see who you're, be friends with everybody, trying to test everything. I was like, no, I'm my own person. But truly, like I have become, and this is what we've talked about, extremely particular about the company I keep, who I have around me, how it affects me, right? So that's one. The other one is you are the architect of your own destiny. That was one of his most famous. And that to me now means we can't always control what happens, but we can control how we respond, right? So again, this unsubscribe or anything I talk about is never about trying to change anyone else's behavior or their characteristics or traits. It's all about your behavior, how you
Fancy a chat? Or maybe you're interested in the Optimized Leader Program Next Level. You can book a free 15-minute call by scanning the QR code on screen or see the link in my show notes.
Show up and how you protect yourself. And then the third one is my dad always would tell me that I live life in rose-colored glasses. And so what I'll tell you when it comes to that is I still do. And some people are probably like, what? I want to see the good in people. I don't believe that everyone is bad and their mom. We do vacations together. We spend the holidays together. I saw her last week. We see each other all the time. We're very close. And they asked me, do you still believe in relationships? Do you still believe in love, even after everything that he put you through? And yes, I do, because I can't imagine if I believed that everybody was like him. Then you would just have a completely different perspective. So I think it's a choice to continue to live life with rose-colored glasses, see the good in people, not have a chip on your shoulder, and then use your experience for something good.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. Your dad sounds like he was a real philosopher. He sounds great. To have
My
given you.
favorite philosopher. That's what I always say about him. He was my favorite philosopher.
And then the rose tinted glasses thing. Yeah, I totally like that. And it's a strength, but also I know sometimes, because what's my podcast called? Optimizing Your Brilliance. I believe we all have the potential to be brilliant. And I love seeing the good in people. But I think back to what you were saying earlier, it's allowing ourselves to trust those gut instincts, isn't it? So that when something is off, trust in that. Thank you so much for coming on as a guest. I've really loved our chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we sign off, I'd like to invite you to my quick reflective practice called Pause, Reflect, Act. As your leadership coach, I'm here to help you translate today's insights into personal growth and your next steps. Answer the prompts that follow in your journal or notes. Alternatively, you can access my complimentary journal and self-coaching tool in the show notes or scan the QR code you can see on screen now. Number 1, where in your life, at work, at home, or in your relationships, are you consistently leaving interactions feeling depleted rather than energized? What patterns do you notice? Number 2, think of a recent time you said yes when you wanted to say no. What were you afraid would happen? Was that fear based on evidence or expectation? Number 3, what responsibilities, emotions, or problems are you currently carrying that actually belong to someone else? And what would it feel like to set those down? If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reed, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Leader Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.